Hey, my name is Claire. I'm 58, and I've spent the last 25 years of my life working as an archivist in a small-town historical society. It's not a glamorous job, but it's one I find solace in. Surrounded by the past, I feel a sense of purpose, a sense of being rooted in something much bigger than myself. Since my husband passed away a few years ago, my life has been predictable routine, predictable and comforting. It's easy that way. I take care of the old records, I organize the shelves, and I go home. That's my world. It's funny how life works, isn't it? We make plans, and we think we know where we're headed. But sometimes, life has other plans we never saw coming, and ones we're never ready for. That's how it all started for me. A moment that seemed so small at the time, but slowly unraveled something bigger. Something I had long forgotten. The morning it happened was like any other. A calm, almost mundane start to a day that would go unnoticed in the grand scheme of things. I arrived at the Historical Society just as the sun was rising, casting a soft amber light over the stacks of old records and books. The smell of aged paper filled the air, and I was wrapped in the comforting silence of the archives. There was no rush here, no deadlines. Just me, the history of this town, and the old stories waiting to be told. That day, I was assigned to organize a box of letters, a task I'd done countless times before. These letters were from the early 1900s, handwritten, in delicate script. Nothing out of the ordinary. As I opened the first envelope, I was immediately struck by the weight of the paper. It was thicker than the usual correspondence I handled, and the ink was a deep, rich shade, almost too dark for something so old. I thought nothing of it at first. Just another letter, another small piece of history to categorize and file away. But as I unfolded the letter and read the first few lines, I was stopped dead in my tracks. It wasn't the usual mundane letter of business or trivial matters. No, this letter was different. This was a letter written with passion, with words carefully chosen, each sentence heavy with meaning. It read, "Dearest Claire, I find myself thinking of you when I shouldn't. The distance between us, the years we've spent apart, only seem to fuel this fire that burns quietly inside me. I never meant for it to go this far, but you must know that my heart has never truly left you. With every passing day, my longing for you only grows. I hope that one day, fate will bring us back together." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. The name Claire wasn't common. It wasn't the name of any family member of mine. And yet, the words felt strangely familiar. They seemed as if they were written for me, to me, even though I knew that couldn't be the case. My mind raced, trying to understand what I was reading. It was as if these words, though written so many years ago, were speaking directly to my soul. For a moment, I thought I had made a mistake. Maybe the letter had been meant for someone else. After all, this was an archive of old, dusty documents. But then I looked at the envelope again, and my breath caught. There was no mistake. The letter was addressed to Claire, my name. The name I had grown up with. The name that had been mine for all these years. The letter, though old, had somehow made its way to me. I sat back in my chair, the weight of the paper in my hands grounding me as my mind raced. Who was this person? Who had written this letter? Was this some kind of mistake? My hands shook as I put the letter down, almost afraid to read the next one. But curiosity won out. I quickly grabbed another envelope from the box, this one even older than the last. The handwriting was faded, but still legible. The paper was frayed at the edges, showing signs of years of being handled. The letter inside was brief, but just as intimate as the first. Claire, I never thought I would write to you again. I know it's been years since we last saw each other, but I can't help it. I think of you all the time. You are the one who has stayed with me, the one who has never truly left my thoughts. If you are reading this, know that my feelings for you have not changed. They never will. Yours, Thomas. Thomas. The name struck me like a thunderbolt. I knew that name. I had known a Thomas many years ago. I had almost forgotten about him, buried the memory deep in the past. But now, reading these words, something was stirring inside me. It was like a key turning in a lock, unlocking a door I had long since shut. Thomas and I had been close once. Years ago, we had spent a summer together. Just the two of us, young and carefree. But life had a way of pulling us in different directions. He had left town, and I had stayed. We lost touch and I moved on. Or at least, I thought I had. But now, these letters, these secret letters had resurfaced, bringing with them a flood of emotions I wasn't prepared for. Was this truly the same Thomas? The same man I had once known and loved? Or was this someone else entirely? Someone with the same name? For the next few days I couldn't focus. I couldn't concentrate on my work. Every moment was consumed by these letters, by the mystery of who had written them, and why they had been left for me to find. I kept asking myself, why now? Why had these letters come to me after all these years? And most importantly, why had they been hidden away for so long? I needed answers. I had to know who Thomas was, what had happened to him, and why these letters had been hidden in the archives for so many decades. It felt like fate was pushing me to uncover the truth, to finish a story that had never had its proper ending. I could feel it in my bones, a sense of urgency, a whisper in the air telling me that I was on the brink of discovering something important, something life-changing. The next part of the story will delve deeper into Claire's journey to uncover the truth, the secrets behind Thomas's letters, and how the past intertwines with her present, leading her to a discovery that will change her life forever. But for now, she stands at the edge of a mystery, unable to shake the feeling that something has been left unfinished, and that her own heart might be the key to unlocking it. A few weeks later, I finally gave in. My name is Claire, and I'm about to discover something that will change the course of my life forever. You see, the man who wrote those letters, he wasn't just anyone. He was someone I knew well. Someone I had forgotten. Someone who had slipped away from my life, leaving behind only memories that now seemed too painful to revisit. For weeks, I couldn't stop thinking about the letters. The more I read them, the more I felt connected to this mysterious man, Thomas. Each letter seemed to pull me deeper into a story I had long forgotten. But I knew I couldn't just let these words sit unanswered, buried in time. They were calling to me. I needed to find out who Thomas was, to uncover the secrets of our past. But it wasn't just about the mystery anymore. It was about understanding what had happened between us, why he had disappeared from my life without so much as a word. What had we been to each other back then? Was it a fleeting summer romance or something deeper? And why, after all these years, had he reached out to me, knowing I might still be here, in this small town, working quietly behind the scenes? The search for answers led me to the town's local archives, a small building nestled between two old shops, one of those places most people walked past without ever thinking twice. Inside, I could feel the weight of history pressing against the walls, decades of forgotten memories stored in dusty boxes, each with its own story to tell. But today, it wasn't just any old history I was searching for. I was looking for a man named Thomas, and the thread that would pull me back to him. I started with the local newspapers. His name, Thomas Ashford, rang in my memory as if it were some distant echo. He had lived here, in this town, many years ago. He had worked, laughed, and loved here before vanishing without a trace. I scrolled through old issues, my eyes scanning for any mention of him. I came across an obituary, Thomas Ashford, a name I had almost forgotten. The article was short, more like a passing mention than a tribute. It listed his death in a car accident several years ago, a tragedy that had taken the life of someone who had once been a prominent figure in our town. I stared at the obituary, my breath catching in my throat. Gone too soon, it said. But for me, Thomas was never gone. Not really. His words, the letters, had brought him back to life in a way I never could have expected. And now, they had led me here, to this moment. The more I read about Thomas, more questions I had. Why hadn't I heard about his death sooner? How had he been so close to me? And yet I had never known the truth about what happened between us. The letters didn't just speak of love, they spoke of regret, of longing, of unfinished business. I spent hours in the archives that day, poring over every scrap of information I could find. It was exhausting, but I couldn't stop. I had to. No more. And then, in the corner of an old filing cabinet, I found a letter, carefully folded, tucked away in a manila envelope. It wasn't one of Thomas's letters, but it was addressed to him. The letter was dated just before his death, and it was written by a woman whose name I didn't recognize. She spoke of her love for Thomas, but more importantly, she spoke of his love for me. She described him as someone who had never truly moved on, someone who carried a torch for a woman from his past, a woman he could never forget. He loved you, Claire, the letter read, more than he ever let on. He talked about you often. Even in his final years, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had abandoned you, that he had left you when you needed him most, that he couldn't return, not after everything that had happened, not after what he'd done. I read those words over and over again, the weight of them sinking into my chest. Had Thomas been carrying this guilt all these years? Had he truly never stopped thinking about me, about us? I had always assumed he had moved on, that his departure was just part of the natural course of life. But now, reading this letter, I realized how little I had understood back then. There were things left unsaid, things that never had the chance to be shared. I left the archives that day in a daze, the letter still clutched tightly in my hand. My mind was spinning, a whirlwind of emotions that I couldn't quite comprehend. The past had come rushing back, and with it, the realization that there was more to this story than I had ever imagined. That the deeper I dug into Thomas's past, the more I began to question my own. What had happened to me after he left? How? Had I let so many years pass without confronting my feelings, without addressing the love I had once had for him? Had I truly forgotten him, or had I buried those memories because they were too painful to revisit? I couldn't help but wonder. What if Thomas had never left? What if he had stayed, and we had faced whatever challenges lay before us together? What would our lives have been like? Would we have built a life together? Or was the love we shared only meant to live in the pages of those letters, never to see the light of day again? The weeks that followed were a blur of discovery and reflection. I kept going back to the letters, reading them over and over. Each time I found something new, something I hadn't noticed before. It was as if Thomas was speaking directly to me, from across time and space, telling me things I had always needed to hear but never dared to ask. But the mystery wasn't over. There were still so many questions left unanswered. What had happened between Thomas and me all those years ago? Why had we let each other go? And what about the woman who had written that letter to him? Who was she? And what did she know about us? One evening, as I sat alone in my living room, my mind buzzing with these questions, I received an unexpected visitor. The knock on the door startled me, and when I opened it, I found myself face to face with an older man, his hair greying at the temples, his expression kind but guarded. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said softly, "but I'm looking for Claire Ashford." I have something for you. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could this man be connected to Thomas in some way? What was this something he had for me? As I stood there, the weight of the past pressing against me, I realized that this was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when all the pieces would finally come together. The truth was closer than I had ever imagined, and I was about to discover it. But would it bring closure? Or would it leave me with even more questions than I had before? The next part of the story will reveal the truth behind Thomas's disappearance, the woman who wrote the letter, and the secret Thomas had been hiding. All these years, one that would change Claire's life forever. The last few months have been a blur. I've uncovered so much about Thomas and about myself. My name is Claire, and I've learned that love isn't always as simple as it seems. Sometimes, the most important stories are the ones that remain, untold, buried in time. It's funny how life works. We spend so much time searching for answers, thinking that if we could just uncover the truth, everything would make sense. But sometimes, the truth isn't as neat as we'd like it to be. It doesn't come in tidy packages, with ribbons tied neatly around it. Sometimes, the truth is messy, complicated, and filled with pieces that don't quite fit together. The man who had knocked on my door was indeed connected to Thomas. He was his older brother, Gregory Ashford. Gregory had been out of town for years, living in the city, and had only recently returned to settle the affairs of the family estate. When he handed me the letter, I could feel the weight of it in my hands. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a key to understanding everything that had remained hidden for so long. Gregory explained that the letter was something Thomas had written just before his death, a letter he had intended to give me, but never had the chance. He spoke of regret, of lost opportunities, and of the love he had never truly let go of. As I sat down with Gregory, he explained more about what had happened all those years ago. Thomas had left town abruptly, and no one had really known why. There were whispers, of course rumors about him being involved in something he couldn't get out of, but none of it was true. Thomas had left because he thought it was for the best, because he believed that by leaving, he was sparing me the pain of the life he had chosen, a life that he believed wasn't good enough for me. He thought he was protecting you, Claire, Gregory said softly. He never wanted to hurt you. He left because he couldn't bear the thought of dragging you into his mess. I sat there in stunned silence, the words sinking in. Thomas had left because he believed it was the right thing to do, but in doing so, he had made the biggest mistake of his life. He had believed that walking away would make things better, but in truth, it had broken both of our hearts. As Gregory spoke, he handed me the letter that Thomas had written before his death. It was long, filled with raw emotion, and written with a sense of urgency that spoke to the regret he had carried with him for so long. I opened the letter slowly, almost afraid of what it might reveal. But as I read, the floodgates opened. Claire, the letter began, I know that by the time you read this, I will no longer be in this world, and I will never be able to tell you these words in person. But I need you to know that I have always loved you. I never stopped loving you. I thought about you every single day. I carried you with me in everything I did, every decision I made. But I couldn't come back. Not after the things I had done. Not after everything that had happened. I thought I was doing the right thing by leaving, but now I realize I was wrong. You deserved so much more than I could give you, and for that, I am truly sorry. I paused, my eyes filling with tears. This was the letter Thomas had never had the chance to send me. This was the confession he had carried with him to his grave. I know this is too late, Claire, the letter continued. But if there's one thing I can ask of you, it's this. Please, find it in your heart to forgive me. I never meant to hurt you, and I never meant to leave you with nothing but unanswered questions. You were always my heart, Claire. Always. I hope, wherever you are, you can find happiness. I hope you can find peace. I put the letter down, my hands shaking. This was everything. This was the truth. The closure I had spent so long searching for. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the reunion I had imagined in my dreams, but it was real. It was Thomas, speaking from beyond the grave, trying to make amends for the mistakes he had made. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. I couldn't stop thinking about the letter, about everything I had uncovered. I had spent so many years living in the shadow of a past that I couldn't quite understand. But now, everything had changed. The pieces of the puzzle were finally fitting together. But as I sat in my living room, looking out at the quiet street, I realized something else. This letter, this revelation, it had freed me. It had set me free from the ghost of Thomas and the life I had imagined for us. I wasn't holding on to a memory anymore. I wasn't clinging to something that could never be. I had loved Thomas, deeply, completely, and I would always cherish the memories of our time together. But that was all they were, memories. I had spent so many years wishing for something that could never be. But now I saw that it was time to move forward. The love we had shared, the connection we had, it was part of my history. But it wasn't my future. The next part of my journey was one I hadn't anticipated. It was one of self-discovery, of letting go of the past and embracing the present. I started to see my life with new eyes. I had spent so many years living in the shadow of loss and regret. But now, I was ready to live. I didn't know exactly what that would look like, but I was excited to find out. And then, one evening, as I sat in the quiet of my home, there was a knock at the door. It was Gregory Ashford again. And this time, he wasn't bringing more letters or more revelations. He was bringing something else entirely. A chance to start fresh. He asked if I would consider joining him and his family for a dinner. It wasn't about Thomas, it was about moving forward. It was about living, and living well, despite everything that had happened. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I wasn't alone anymore. I had finally found the peace I had been searching for, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. As I sat at the dinner table, surrounded by people who understood me and accepted me, I realized something profound. Love, the kind of love Thomas had written about, wasn't meant to be perfect. It wasn't meant to follow a straight line or be wrapped in a neat bow. Sometimes, love is messy. Sometimes, it's about letting go of the past, forgiving and moving on. But that doesn't mean it was any less real. In fact, it was more real than I had ever understood. The truth was that love doesn't end when a person leaves. It doesn't end when circumstances change or when time passes. Love lingers. It echoes through the years, reminding us of what once was and what could have been. But ultimately, love is about living. And that's what I finally understood. Thomas had loved me. And in his own way, he always would. But it was time for me to love myself, to find joy in the present, to live fully, and to let the past be the past. And so, I let go of the final thread that had bound me to the past. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Truly free. This wasn't the ending I had imagined for Thomas and me, but it was the ending I needed. The love we had, the letters he wrote, they were all part of my story, a story that had shaped me. But now it was time to write the next chapter. As I sat there, surrounded by new beginnings and the possibility of what was to come, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that remain unfinished. Because the greatest love story is the one we live. Every single day.